Call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Tuesday, April 4th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Redmond.
Here.
Mr. Weisgerber.
Here.
Mr. Parker.
Here.
Mr. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Bateman.
Here.
All right. Next order of business is the review and approval of meeting minutes from the Planning and Zoning meeting dated March 7th, 2023. Do we have any changes, corrections, or comments to those minutes? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as noted. Second.
Mr. Weisgerber.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill.
Yes.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. Redmond.
Yes.
5-0. Motion carries.
Next order of business is open forum. We have no one signed up for open forum, so we'll roll into new business, which is case 2023-03, the Highland Avenue Condominium Site Plan Review. Do we have, would you like to give a summary from the city on
Yes, sir.
this case?
This application was filed by Mr. Landholt, representing Parkside Development Group, for the construction of 9 single-family 2-story attached dwelling units with driveway accesses, site utilities, stormwater infrastructure, and detention areas on approximately 1.817 acres located on Highland Avenue and West Main Street. So what we have sort of tried to give the board, this has been a sort of another case that's had a long, genesis in that. And it is really an infill project that is a result of the city's efforts to advance the goals of creating new investment in affordable housing in the Loveland Heights neighborhood. And so with that, Mr. Landholt purchased the property, obtained a BZA variance to allow for some reductions in setbacks and other relief. Originally, the project was 18 units. These were 2 9-unit buildings, one on either side of the street. At this time, they've elected to only advance, the one side at this time. And then because of some challenges associated with a lack of stormwater improvements in the areas contributing to the overall drainage area for the site. And so they have provided an enlarged detention basin for that. The Planning and Zoning Code is very specific with regard to site plan review applications. The applicant has furnished this information. City Engineering has completed the review. Latest letter was March 22nd, 2023. Ms. Klopfenstein recommends approval pending addressing the issues. A lot of these issues are just standard, when you get into the development process, the permitting process. Really, we're at 50, 60% plans, and we're going to get to 100% plans. So those are really fine, and we can work through that. One note I did in the analysis, I addressed a couple of components of that. When you look at the driveway access comment, it is a 1-car drive. A standard 2-car drive is a 16-foot car garage. 8-foot drive. We did ask them to modify the design to include the apron flares in that, which will accommodate the turning radius from the road. With regard to the stormwater, they have plus sized the stormwater basin to accommodate. What you really have is you have a couple of areas in the heights that have no detention whatsoever, and there's a significant influence that pushes through that, and so they have to sort of check that water plus the water contributing from their site. And then as far as the sidewalk, I provided a couple photos. The existing walk terminates on the detention. We'll call it the detention side of the street. Really, at this point, there's no need to really require them to switch that walkway based on the original plans because, A, if you put it on the developed side at this time, it will really be a sidewalk literally to nowhere. And 2, what I would recommend, and it's in the recommendations, is that in the event that there is some additional area for future development, we'll call it the west side, I believe. And when that advances, that would be the time that would obligate the developer to extend that sidewalk as part of that portion of the project. So Don't know what that's going to look like. The stormwater changes, they are significant. They do impact the site. So with that, we recommend approval of this proposal and incorporating two comments or two conditions are recommended, that they address all regulatory agency comments and requiring the installation of the sidewalk on the on the western side of the parcel, extending from the present terminus all the way to West Main Street. That concludes my staff report.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions from anyone? Yes.
I have some questions.
Sure.
So, a couple questions with regards to the improvements on the half that's presented here, BZA approval for the 18 units. As the future comes around, vision to the future, what happens with the other half? Is there a plan to develop the other half and do something different with the detention? In other words, make it underground or do something. I know it's cost prohibitive. Is this all one parcel? Can it be split for selling off half the parcel? You know, again, there's a BZA approval for the initial plan. We're talking about approving to move forward with the half as presented.
Yes.
So is there, or has there been discussion around what keeps the rest of this in bounds?
So in my mind, the way this works is the plan is still binding with regard to the variances and the relief sought. So again, they've built nothing, so we're not going to penalize them for that. So with that, what I would envision is a reduced scope on the west side, or they would need to come back and file for some modification to that if they sought to build a different product. So in that instance, if you look at that site plan where the detention area is, they could theoretically bring, it looks like, probably 4 of those units in there and maybe provide for some additional, a smaller amount of underground detention in the rear yard. The underground detention, we discussed that with them, and that's really what resulted in this configuration, because the costs are just so prohibitively expensive, especially for a small project of this character. And so right now the lot configuration would be, I would assume it's probably realistically 4 additional units if they want to meet the market. And again, they're a pioneer in this because there hasn't been a lot of new investment in that. So I think part of that too is current market conditions and construction costs. And so allowing the takedown of these units, they may say, hey, we only want to build 4 more units. And then we would have them bring in a plan consistent with the BZA approval. But if they wanted to regain or recapture those other units that they're losing due to the detention, I believe that would require some modification from, going back to the BZA to seek some additional relief in that. So,
Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, the BZA can make extensions. I know Corey touched on it a little bit, but this project has obviously been a joint project between the city and Aaron, because the city sold the property, city worked with, and one of the first flags of the many Aaron has had to hurdle through was that the road didn't meet the required width. So the city worked with him to do an expansion of the roadway, place an assessment on the properties. And so it has been obviously a joint effort. I think once he gets rolling on this, my feeling from conversations with him is we'll have a mutual discussion about what's going to happen with the other side. There's a lot of options that we could do that would work for the Heights as a whole. But, there's many options we'll have. But I get my answer. Most of what I hear from Aaron is I need to get this side going, which we're all for.
Yeah.
And
and I appreciate that. I think, we've talked about this where Loveland is today, the fact that we're going to be looking at a lot more infill, right? The processes that we use also have to be consistent with that type of development, right? And I'm just kind of poking a little bit at making sure that our processes are in place so that as this project moves forward and then grows, gets modified, whatever, our processes are sufficient to manage that going forward.
I think that the processes we have, we could manage it with that. Again, looking forward, as the commission's aware, we are engaging in a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning code. I actually have red lines open on my computer now for some administrative chapters as far as kind of streamlining the process and all of that, and looking to make that process more efficient with regard to, getting from concept to go build it in a much more, efficient manner as opposed to churning over and over again. So I think, yes, I think absolutely. And I think to Mr. Kennedy's point, there's a whole bunch of different options as to how that other side could develop, because the market may change in that. And so, and it may soften, or it may become further, desirable in that. And I think time will tell with the first phase of this as to what will happen. I think it's a good project. It really advances a lot of the city's goals and objectives in that neighborhood in particular, and also in general as far as promoting a variety of housing opportunities.
And just one more kudos for the city, for city council and the CIC, which Dave is on. The city didn't take the revenues from the sale of this property and put it in our pocket, in the general fund, just throw it into account. This went into a grant program, which has funded over $37,000 worth of grants to owner-occupied exterior housing. And that's a real commitment. This year also is a year that numerous streets on the Heights will be resurfaced. And we also received $75,000 for new tot lots. And we're working with the school district to create outdoor classrooms at both the Cherokee and the Navajo lots. So this sort of started it all because it was that money that we used rather than most cities, let's be honest, throw it back into our fund. But this went directly towards the people. So I think that's a good thing that for some reason doesn't get much play.
Yeah. No, the reinvestment and investment in the Heights has always been something council's kept a close eye on.
And they've done a good job.
It's really important. The utilities, there wasn't, I don't think, much shown. Are those below grade, or are they
so
a mix?
I think if my memory serves me right, it's probably aerial electric. All your other utilities are going to be underground. Okay. So.
Yeah, just with the way their buildings are, I wasn't sure if there was going to be one that cascades down or multiples that come from the street, or how that was going to.
From a builder perspective, I would imagine that they, and he's here, he could probably speak to that. But in my mind, then now is the time to bury it. Take a drop off a pole and bury those just for the frontage.
Yeah.
So
that's what I couldn't tell if they were or weren't. So I just highly recommend if we can put them underground from a reliability standpoint. It's a much better choice. They aren't. Is it trenched?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the applicant said he can comment on
Oh, yes, please. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I was reading something. Yes, please state your name and.
So Aaron Landell, Parkside Development Group. So on page 29, I think in the packet is the Duke Energy design, I guess, preliminary design. So the plan now is to put one pole that is an aerial that would be the south corner of that lot. And then it is underground all the way to a new transformer at the north end of the lot that will feed a meter bank that is on the side of the house, and then interior wiring from there.
Okay, thank you. I see that now.
Thank you.
And then I had one other question.
Yes.
The overflow from the detention, is there an easement that goes to the stormwater at the street or under the street, or how does that get?
So in talking to Ms. Kloppenstein, so the stormwater outlet will discharge into the city's right of way. And so it will connect to an existing system and then make its way into the existing system that then proceeds further down and then ultimately outlets behind the Goodwill Center. So, stormwater law is pretty clear. You have to accept water that is in the system, and you can't impound water. And so this project sort of walked that fine line in that, and that's why they had to over-design it, because if you look at, I think it's packet page 73, the drainage calcs for that, you can see the overall drainage area. It's really called a bypass drainage area that is demonstrating all of the water that's now presently coming through that. And so they will outlet into the city system. And then by virtue of that, it'll go from their lot to the detention basin and then into the city system, which then discharges through a private network. But obviously, that's a long established existing system that's there. So,
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if that was going to discharge across the right of way versus
the overflow. I guess the emergency overflow, the road does become an emergency. I mean, I guess if you're at a 500 year or 1,000, but at the end of the day, it's going to travel down the right of way in that, and then there are appropriately defined swales further toward the terminus of West Main that could accommodate that. In fact, most of that section is curb and gutter, particularly on the one side, and then there's a ditch line on the other side that would accommodate that. So,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
While we're talking about the detention basin, it's great that it's being improved instead of creating a swamp. And understand that no developer likes to take and make half of a parcel they wanted a swimming pool at times. The real concern with this one is you don't control what's upstream from you. And we all know that these detention basins get silted up, dirtied up, trash, leaves that all will migrate to this basin. I think it's prudent that we have a condition or potentially discuss a condition and how this is going to be maintained. Great. It's great to have these. It's a requirement, but people build them. They don't get a stand of grass. They don't get anything. And I'm not saying it needs to be a pristine parkland, but it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be maintained. They silt up. This one's going to be a little bit more susceptible to debris, not big debris, but small debris that will collect in the bottom and silt the bottom up a lot quicker than anything else because of all the leaves and the residential upstream. So I just think we need to have some mechanism to say that there is some covenant that it's going to be maintained to a level. I don't know. In talking with staff, I don't know that we have something in the books now, or if we need to have that as a simple condition that they'll come up with a maintenance plan and implement that maintenance plan as part of this approval. It's really just to make sure that it stays nice. You walk by the ones, I walk by 3 or 4 of them when I walk downtown here, and they're not in great condition. And it's, I think from you, you're gonna want to maintain it because it's going to be a part of half dozen times a year. It's not going to be a park across the street, but it's going to be a place where it's going to look nice all the time. So I just think there just needs to be some kind of mechanism for you. You have a vested interest to make it look great, but at some point in time you may sell it, and we want something that lives with the property that's maintained. So I don't know what mechanism we can do with that, Dave or Corey.
I think there's such a mechanism in the Hamilton County.
we do have some enforcement provisions, and then something long term that I think that I talked to Cindy about was I know in my prior life we would actually steer people toward what's called a ditch petition process. It actually allowed for people to petition for the county to come in and there be an assessment on that. We aren't at that point yet.
Right.
But we do have mechanisms to enforce, and I know Cindy has routinely done that. Generally, though, with these detention basins, appearance doesn't necessarily also indicate function, because the below grade structures could be fine, but they could be overgrown or whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, there is an obligation on our current regulations. If it would please the commission, we could have them file a plan for maintenance that we would throw in a file. And
I think that's just simple. That's just very simple. That here's our plan. We're gonna keep it mowed. We're gonna clean it out the silt out, the leaves out, any debris that gets in it.
I really do think in the recent amendments to our stormwater, as dictated by Hamilton County, which is over both Hamilton, Claremont, and Warren County, part of the city, these provisions were in place because I had to take Cindy's memo to council. So let me do a little check-in, and back to what Corey said.
Okay.
I think it's already in place. There is such a thing for larger subdivisions called the Ohio Ditch Law, where there's a perpetual assessment on every property. The city then, in the early years, can simply use those funds. It wouldn't work for a smaller project. The city can simply use those funds to have an engineer do a walkthrough, make some minor. As that fund grows, it's an assessment to the city. They can use that for any, what's the word, sloughing, whatever the.
Yeah,
I don't know the words. I learned most of my words from Corey. But I really do think there are provisions already in place that give the city everything they need just from Cindy's movement. So I think we're good.
925.2. Let's see. Hang on. I just had it here a second. Notice to correct improper drainage, 925.31. So whenever we find there's incorrect drainage, we can, or when the water course is obstructed, we can order that. So we have, they have 30 days based on the regulations.
But I also think from an appearance standpoint.
Right. So you're looking more as much about the above ground appearance of it as the
It's just
proper
got
function.
to be maintained. They still function being a cattail farm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we really want there. And I don't think you don't want it there. That's for sure. So I just think we just need to have something from a functionality standpoint. I think is covered, but from an appearance, just a maintenance plan, a request for a maintenance plan, what you're going to do to address things. I think the simple as that.
I think that's a good idea, especially considering the fact that the original intent was for that parcel to be something than what it is actually going to be. So to sort of put a little assurance into that it will not just be a holdover for something that is to come later, but will actually become part of a maintenance plan. So I agree with that recommendation.
I feel for you too, because it's a tough little spot to drain.
Are there any, I guess another question too is if it were to become blocked and fill up and stay full of water, is there any liability on the city safety concerns if somebody little kid wanders in there and
I mean, it's private property.
so it's private property, so don't have to worry about that. Okay. Any other questions? No? Thanks.
I guess my only other comment was looking at renderings, looking at the renderings and some of the greenery that's presented in the rendering versus the landscaping plan. There's a little bit of a disconnect, but there isn't a whole lot of space out front for shrubs or trees. But I don't know, is that up to the residents at some point, or that it's just noticeably different? That's all.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting it has to change. I'm not telling the plan changes.
To your point, they are a little bit space constrained.
Yeah, they are.
Yes.
And I totally get that.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like it had a little greenery around the outside edge, and I get that. So if at all possible.
You could do what I did with my first house, which was a little postage stamp. I put an oak tree there, and then 30 years later, it was a very huge oak tree that
Monster.
the owners, I'm sure, did not appreciate at the time. Yeah, so that's a good point. Any other? Nobody? So so the question is for recommendation, it's been outlined in here that the would be conditionally approved as submitted and incorporating the two conditions. So the two conditions listed here currently, the applicant shall address all requirements of all regulatory agencies having jurisdiction over the proposed project prior to the issuance of building permits to advance the project to construction as applicable. And point two is, as such time Then any future development is advanced for the western side, which is the current or the planned detention system of the proposed development. Developer shall install sidewalks connecting the present walk terminating at the north property line along the entire length of the frontage along Highland Avenue, extending to the Highland Avenue West Side Main Street intersection. Said walkway location and design shall be subject to review and approval of the city. So we've got basically meeting all regulatory agency requirements as well as installing a sidewalk as part of the conditionally approved. Is that correct?
Yes, those are our recommendations, and then obviously the board has the discretion to add additional.
If there's anything else anybody wanted to add as a conditional approval, we could do that too.
I think we do want to add one.
For the maintenance of the
The applicant that will provide a maintenance plan to address ongoing maintenance and appearance. Something simple. It's just something simple to. I don't know if we need to set a standard or let them set the standard on what they want it to look like in this maintenance agreement.
Yeah, I mean, can we reference the what's required in the Hamilton County regulatory?
Hamilton County doesn't. They just do drainage. They won't do appearance. I don't believe. Correct, Dave?
If I'm understanding, I think that you would add a condition number 3 that would say the applicant shall provide a maintenance plan to address the ongoing maintenance of vegetation within the basin.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we wanted to add something about appearance, we could do that too, I guess.
Yeah, and that's really what.
Okay. Do we have a?
Does
Anybody want to make? Go
does
ahead.
it change its ownership when you award it as applicant?
When we award it, it should run with the land. Correct, Dave?
Please.
When we do an approval on the project, it runs with the land. Correct?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's whoever is developing the project has to meet that condition of the planning and zoning commission. You could say the applicant or assignees, designees, whatever.
All right. Does anyone would like to make a motion towards this?
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations as outlined. The Planning Commission to conditionally approve this application for the site plan review for Highland Avenue condominium project as submitted, and incorporating the following additional conditions as follows. 1. The applicant shall address all requirements of all regulatory agencies having jurisdiction over the proposed project prior to the issuance of building permits to advance the project to construction as applicable. Number 2, at such time that any future development is advanced on the western side of the proposed development, the developer shall install sidewalk connecting the present walks terminating at the northern property line along the entire length of the frontage along Highland Avenue, extending to the Highland Avenue and West Main Street intersection. Said walkway location and design shall be subject to review and approval by the city. We're going to add a number 3. The applicant will provide a maintenance plan to address the ongoing maintenance of vegetation and appearance of the detention basin.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, motion carries.
Okay.
Roll call.
Yeah, usually we roll call, but I didn't know.
Yeah, we've done it before. Okay.
That's okay.
Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill.
Yes.
Mr. Redmond.
Yes.
Mr. Weisgerber.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
5-0, motion carries.
Mathematically, that was
I
the same, wasn't it?
I forgot who I started with last time.
It just caught me by surprise.
It's okay. It's hot in
The
here.
camera's on me. Ah.
It's getting to us.
That's you trying.
Any communications?
Not at this time.
Okay. Any? We have a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
5-0, motion carries.
Or adjourned.